Morning in Willow Creek, Ohio, arrives like a soft confession. The town wakes beneath a hush of maple leaves and the long whistle of a freight train sunlight pooling in the cracks of brick storefronts and on the waxed linoleum floors of Willow Creek Elementary. Children tumble through the doors in a swirl of backpacks and winter hats, shoelaces trailing voices bright as bells. In room 12, Rachel Miller stands at the whiteboard, a streak of dry erase ink on her thumb and a quiet joy in her chest that feels most days like a second pulse. She loves beginnings, the scrape of chairs as 22 small bodies settle the small drama of show and tell, the way a question can bloom into a dozen smaller questions, and she can stand in the middle of that curiosity like a lighthouse. She draws long division the way her favorite teacher once drew constellations, not with hardness but with wonder, as if the numbers might tell the students something true about themselves if they just lean close enough to hear. When a child's face opens in recognition when they find a way through a problem that had felt like a door welded shut, she feels something lift inside her. Some days the lightness lasts all the way home. Those are the days when she remembers to breathe between tasks. On others, there's a tug at the base of her neck that is easy to ignore at first, no sharper than the ache left by a heavy scarf or a half-slept night. It sits there quiet, like a pebble in a shoe. She rubs it once with the back of her fingers and continues because there are spelling tests to grade and calls to return and a bulletin board of paper snowflakes that won't staple itself. The ache recedes into a background hum. After dismissal, the school breathes out. Tiny handprints drift along the hallway like echoes. Rachel lines up glue sticks on a shelf, turns off the lamps, and carries a tote bag home through air that tastes like cold pennies. She lives 5 blocks away in a second-floor apartment above a florist, the stairwell steep and narrow and perfumed by roses that never seem to die. The kitchen window faces west. If she's lucky, she washes dishes in a light the color of a ripe peach. On the counter, a single wedding magazine lies open, a circle of coffee on an advertisement for silk peonies she doesn't plan to buy. She and Jason want simple things. A small ceremony under a sycamore. Lemon cake. The vows they have already begun to write in a shared notebook, pages softened by thumbprints. There is a photograph clipped to the refrigerator with a sun-shaped magnet, Jason in navy scrubs, hair flattened by a cap. Eyes creased at the corners from smiling, an ambulance blurred behind him. He is a paramedic with steady hands and a calm that can still the frantic beat of a terrible moment. When the phone rings at 2 a.m, he listens. When he arrives, he kneels. He says people's names as if the names are ropes he is throwing them from a shore they can't see. When he leaves, he washes his hands at the sink and stands in the doorway of the bedroom watching Rachel sleep, the gratitude like a weight and also like wings. He met her at the town's fall festival when the air smelled of cinnamon and wood smoke, and the school choir sang in wool caps under a string of lights. She'd been pouring hot chocolate for parents and running a raffle table with the unflappable cheer of someone who believed in small towns the way some people believe in saints. He walked up to trade a stack of dollar bills for a paper cup that steamed in the cold and found himself lingering at her booth for reasons that felt in that instant too simple to name. The raffle prizes were the ordinary bric-a-brac of a community gift certificates for haircuts and oil changes, a hand-knit scarf, a basket of jams, but when she handed him his ticket, he felt like he had won something already. They began with walks that stretched long and then longer, with a shared belief that an ordinary life lived with care could be extraordinary. In February, he took her to the frozen edge of Pine Lake, and the world around them was so quiet it felt as if it had been pressed under glass. He asked the question. She laughed through tears and nodded. The ring was small because his salary was modest, but the promise it represented felt vast. They began counting forward from that moment as if the future were a series of stepping stones already visible in the water save for the venue. Call the aunt in Idaho, choose a first dance, learn to cook one recipe, neither of them could fail. The tug at her neck becomes a regular companion around the same time. Lentils replace pasta on the grocery list, and she has to replace 3 dried-out markers in a single week. It announces itself not with sharpness, but with persistence, the way a song can lodge in the mind until humming back becomes the only form of relief. She rubs the spot at night in the bathroom mirror and tells herself she is tired. She is often right. The days can be long. They are full of small bodies and big feelings and papers to copy on a machine that jams too often. And yet, there are moments that make the winter feel like a season invented for the only purpose of giving people an excuse to be kind. A boy who struggles with reading brings her a book he has finished on his own and tells her it felt like climbing a mountain with someone holding his rope. A girl who stays after class to clean the chalk tray asks if teachers get stars on their charts too. A mother leaves a Tupperware of soup on her desk with a note that says simply, "Thank you for seeing my child." On those days, the tug loses shape, and she forgets it until the end of the night when she stands at the sink and sees her face under the harsh kitchen light and thinks, "I look pale." She gets more sleep drinks, more water starts the habit of warm compresses. The worry blurs into housekeeping. Jason notices long before she names it. He notices the way she presses her fingers to her throat when she laughs as if steadying something that might otherwise shift. He notices the new slowness in her mornings, the way she stands on the threshold of the day and takes an extra breath. He mentions none of it until the evening he cannot keep quiet. It is the first Thursday of March, the sky refusing night like a child refusing bedtime. There is a flyer on their kitchen table for a charity bike ride scheduled in late spring, a benefit for cancer research organized by the hospital where she sometimes volunteers on weekends reading to children in the pediatric wing. The paper is bright with impossible optimism. Cyclists with their arms lifted across a finish line, smiles wide as if effort were a kind of joy. Rachel taps the dates with her finger. Says it could be fun. Says it might be a way to celebrate everything they still have to look forward to. She does not say that she likes causes with edges because the world grows so often ragged and stories about cures are easier to hold than stories about everything and everyone that cannot be cured. Jason brews chamomile tea the way he learned from his mother, who believed that warm, simple things could gently persuade the body to remember itself back into ease. He sets a mug in front of Rachel, steam wrinkling the air. When she tilts her head to blow across the surface, her hair falls away from her neck like a curtain drawing back. He sees the place where her skin rises in a small, distinct swell. It is not dramatic. It is not the kind of thing a person would notice if they were not looking with love and the trained caution of someone who has learned to hear trouble at a distance. But he is looking, and he sees. He asks softly, almost as if addressing a creature that might startle. She shrugs, then uses the pads of 2 fingers to find the bump, as if to confirm its reality to both of them at once. It has the give of a knot beneath the skin. It has the insistence of a doorbell rung and rung. She tells him she is fine, and most of her believes it. It isn't that she doesn't trust Jason's instinct for danger. It's that the architecture of her life is built on small, reasonable reassurances stacked in neat lines, a good meal, 8 hours of sleep, 2 days off, when the district calendar declares them. She knows what not to panic about. She has lived in this body long enough to recognize the particular mischief of winter, how it makes everything feel heavier and everything feel like it will last forever. The next morning, she stands at her closet and chooses a navy sweater that makes her feel older in a good way, and a scarf that covers her throat without looking like she is hiding. She arranges her classroom the way she always does, rows curved into a horseshoe so she can step into the center the way a conductor steps onto a podium. She reads aloud from a book about a little girl who takes up space in a room that didn't plan to make room for her, and the children are better than she deserves, and worse than she expects, which is to say, they are children. At recess, she sits on a bench and watches them fling themselves into a sky big enough to forgive them their belief in invincibility. At lunch, she calls her mother Margaret, who answers on the 3rd ring, with a voice that carries its own weather sunshine, when the day is dull rain, when the soil needs it. They talk about the dress, which Margaret is determined to help pay for, and about the short list of songs for the first dance, which Margaret insists must include something that will embarrass Jason in a way that will become in the family mythology the good kind of story they will tell for years. Rachel finds herself saying nothing about the lump. She tells herself it is because she does not want to borrow trouble. She also tells herself it is because she wants to see her mother's face amaze itself at cake tastings without the shadow that a single new fact can throw. The ache grows less polite that afternoon. When Rachel raises her arm to write, there is a tug that feels less like a request and more like a demand. She lowers the marker, smiles at a child who has discovered that the letter G can wear a tail like a cat and waits for the sensation to pass. It does not. She finishes the sentence anyway. When the final bell releases its long breath and the building empties, she stays in the quiet for a while, hands folded flat on the desk as if pressing the day closed. The overhead lights stutter and then still. She puts on her coat. Outside, the early thaw streets gleam. The florist downstairs has tossed a bucket of old stems into the alley, and the scent of bruised petals meets her halfway down the stairs. She imagines the spring version of herself already waiting around a corner, flushed with the small victories that belong to warming months, bruised knees on playgrounds, the first open windows, the first night they eat on the balcony without jackets. She is almost to the sidewalk when she hears the siren. It is not meant for her. It is for someone 2 blocks over whose story will not intersect with hers except as sound. Even so, it pulls a thread in her heart the way sirens always do when you love someone who runs toward trouble. Jason will later say that he felt it too from the front seat of the ambulance, a tug he could not place, by the time he parks and climbs the stairs to their apartment. Dusk is a more persuasive storyteller than afternoon, and the kitchen is a room that believes in small rituals, cutting boards lined with carrot peels, butter softening in a dish, a stack of invitations they have been meaning to address. He cooks because he has learned that chopping is a kind of prayer, and the rhythm of a knife through vegetables can return a person to a heart that beats without shouting. Rachel leans against the counter, an unglamorous fatigue settling behind her eyes like silt. She insists she will help, then does not. He does not point it out. They move around each other the way people do when they have rehearsed a dance enough that even the smallest gestures are part of the steps, the reaching for salt, the passing of a spoon, the shoulder pressed briefly to a shoulder just to say, "I am here." Dinner is light. The conversation lighter, the librarian's new display, an old patient who sent a thank-you card, a neighbor's dog suddenly perfecting the art of escape. It is not until dishes are stacked and the kettle returns to the stove that the moment arrives again, not to be deferred this time by small talk or small tasks. Rachel rubs her neck. She is not looking at Jason when she does it, which is to say she is not yet ready to make the unspoken visible. He steps closer anyway because love has a different definition of ready. He asks to see. The air between them tightens and then softens. She turns her head, gathers her hair in one hand, and the kitchen light finds the shape neither of them can deny. It is the smallest of betrayals, the body making a secret in a place impossible to hide. He does not say the words that flash through his training, the lists of possibilities, the diagrams that live in the backs of textbooks. He does not name his fear, because fear once named can take up a chair at the table and refuse to leave. Instead, he asks, how long? She answers in a half shrug that could be days or weeks. Long enough to notice, not long enough to confess. He touches the edge of the swelling, not with the clinical assessment of a medic, but with the reverence of someone touching a doorway he is not sure it is safe to open. She closes her eyes against the intimacy of being seen so precisely. Somewhere outside, tires hiss on wet pavement. Somewhere far away, a train pulls the tail of its voice across the horizon. Inside, the kettle begins to hum. A person can live for months beside a possibility and not let it into the house. A person can step around the lump in their throat the way they step around a box they keep meaning to take to the thrift store. But there are nights when the threshold will not be held and the future leans in. The water boils. The space between decision and indecision narrows to a breath. Later in bed, Rachel lies on her side and watches the red number of the clock perform its simple math. She thinks of her students, how they will raise their hands without looking at their work, how she will smile at the courage of that gesture and ask them to show their thinking. She wonders what it would sound like if she did the same with her own body. Hand up voice. Steady. Here is what I notice. Here is where it hurts. Here is what I am afraid to say out loud. Jason sleeps lightly the way people do when they have learned to answer alarms. Some nights his phone will break the surface of their quiet. tonight it does not. He turns toward her anyway, as if his body has been briefed by a messenger his mind has not yet met. She moves his hand to her sternum and lets it rest there as if to reassure them both that the beat is still there, ordinary and miraculous as ever. Tomorrow there will be classrooms and sirens and the 100 small errands through which a life carries itself forward. Tomorrow there will be the flyer for the charity bike ride. Its cheerfulness unbruised, and the list they have been making called After the Wedding, as if time were a long hallway of doors they could open in sequence. But tonight there is the knowledge that some doors open on their own. The kettle cools. The house breathes. The lump at her throat is small and present like a planet a person can see only when the light is right. She decides nothing and everything. She decides at the very least to tell herself the truth. At dawn, the window is pewter with the kind of light that cannot yet commit. Rachel wakes with a clarity that feels like a coin pressed into her palm. She showers, dresses, and knots a scarf that is more habit than disguise. She leaves her hair down. She takes her mug in both hands and stands at the sink while the day gathers itself. She lifts her chin and touches the place again, this time without flinching. Jason enters the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and for a heartbeat they hover at the edge of the conversation that will rethread their lives. He reaches past her for 2 mugs, and before he can pour, she tips her head and gathers her hair back the way a swimmer gathers it before stepping into cold water. She does not speak. She does not need to. The morning makes the shape plain. He meets her eyes, and all the worlds he knows, the controlled urgency of the ambulance, the precise geometry of triage, the extraordinary ordinary of breakfast together, overlap into a single intent. He sets the kettle down. The steam rises between them like a veil he is about to lift. He opens his mouth to say her name, just as in the apartment's quiet the first siren of the day pulls its silver thread through the town. The moment stands, then tips. The world begins to move. The second Thursday of March unfurls in shades of gray. In Willow Creek, Ohio, the morning sky hangs low thick with the smell of wet asphalt, as though the town itself has paused its breath. Rachel Miller lingers at the kitchen counter with a scarf wound carefully around her neck. She smiles at Jason, who is adjusting the laces of his boots before his shift, but the smile does not reach her eyes. Jason has seen too many faces in too many ambulances not to recognize the difference. The lump he noticed last night has not left his mind. It has imprinted itself on his thoughts with the stubbornness of a warning light. For a man trained to respond when a body begins whispering its distress in action feels like betrayal. But Rachel is not just another patient. She is the woman he intends to marry, the woman whose laughter has become his calendar marking time more faithfully than any clock. She pours tea into a ceramic mug, but her hand trembles just enough that the surface ripples. Jason watches, and the moment feels long. He weighs the words he could say, the urgency he could unleash. But words can push as much as they can comfort. He chooses silence for now, dear Naket. By afternoon, the school bell rings Rachel out into a corridor of echoing footsteps. She moves slower than usual, shoulders hunched against an ache she can no longer deny. The scarf brushes against her throat and feels heavier than fabric should. Students wave their goodbyes, one handing her a folded paper airplane covered in glitter glue. She smiles, but her hand lifts reflexively to her neck the instant the hallway empties. That evening, Jason returns home earlier than expected. He finds her at the kitchen table, papers spread out, head bowed as though she has leaned too far into fatigue. The scarf is gone. The lump is not. In the soft lamplight it is no longer ambiguous, no longer a shadow that might be imagination. Jason kneels beside her chair. He does not ask permission this time. He places his hand gently on her throat, fingertips grazing the swollen place that feels hotter than the rest of her skin. The professional part of his mind, the one trained to measure, categorize, anticipate sounds, alarms he does not want to hear. The human part, the fiancé part, feels only fear. Rachel, he whispers, but it is not a question. It is a plea. She shakes her head quickly, too quickly. Not tonight, she breathes, voice fragile as if speaking risks shattering the moment into shards she will never gather back. But Jason has already made a decision. He stands, reaches for the phone, and dials. His voice steadies with the cadence of training as he explains the situation to the dispatcher, yet inside every word costs him. This is not routine. This is personal. King. The wail of sirens cuts through the neighborhood 15 minutes later, their sound carving a path through the evening air. Rachel sits frozen torn between fear of what might come and the ache of abandoning denial. Jason squeezes her hand until the paramedics arrive. He knows their faces: Tom, who collects baseball cards, and Angela, who hums lullabies under her breath when patients panic. But tonight, their presence does not feel like routine colleagues. It feels like the fragile line between ordinary life and something irreversible. They help Rachel onto the stretcher with careful precision. The air inside the ambulance smells faintly of antiseptic and the ghost of old smoke from coats carried in haste. Jason rides beside her, his uniform shirt still on, though tonight he is no medic. He is simply a man clinging to the hand of the person he cannot imagine losing. The ride feels endless and immediate all at once. Red lights smear across windows, buildings flicker past in fragments, the city drawing itself toward them in urgent strokes. Rachel closes her eyes, not in sleep, but in defense. Each bump in the road sends a pulse of pain through her neck, and she grips Jason's hand harder. He leans closer, whispers reassurances that sound thin to his own ears, but he keeps speaking because silence feels crueler. At the Cleveland Hospital, fluorescent lights greet them with a harshness that erases all illusions. The corridors smell of bleach and distant coffee. Nurses in pale blue scrubs take Rachel into their practiced orbit, vital signs, intake questions, swift notes scribbled with efficiency. Jason follows his presence, tethering Rachel to the idea that she is not alone, that beyond the white walls and clipped instructions there is still the man who knows her handwriting, her favorite songs, her plans for spring flowers. Tests begin. Needles slide into veins, vials fill with blood machines, hum and blink. Rachel lies still, eyes on the ceiling tiles patterned with specks that look too much like constellations. She tries to trace them into shapes that promise safe passage, but the shapes collapse under the weight of her fear. Hours bend. Jason paces the length of the hallway, his body taut with helplessness. In the field, he is trained to act, to press, to stitch, to deliver. Here, in the hospital's waiting machinery, he can only wait. He thinks of her classroom, of the tiny paper airplanes, of the bicycle flyer still pinned to their refrigerator. He thinks of vows half-written. The helplessness is its own kind of pain. At last, Dr. Michael Harris enters the room. His face carries the practiced calm of a man who has delivered both miracles and heartbreak. He pulls up a chair, sits and folds his hands in his lap before speaking. The room seems to brace itself. "Rachel," he begins, voice low, deliberate. "The tests confirm something we need to address immediately." His eyes shift between her and Jason, anchoring them both. "You have what's called medullary thyroid carcinoma. It's a rare form of thyroid cancer, and based on your scans, it has been developing quietly for several years." The words fall like stones into still water. Rachel's chest tightens. The sterile air of the room suddenly feels too thin. Jason's fingers lock around hers, his jaw clenched against the urge to demand a different reality. Dr. Harris continues, each syllable wrapped in a gravity that cannot be softened. He explains that the cancer is aggressive, rooted in neuroendocrine cells, and that it often advances silently until the body begins to protest, as hers has now. He outlines the treatment: immediate surgery to remove the thyroid, followed by radiation, possibly chemotherapy. He emphasizes urgency, and then comes the weight that crushes what strength Rachel has left. "Rachel, I need you to know that treatment will affect your ability to have children. In truth, it is very likely you will not be able to conceive after this process." Silence expands unbearable. Rachel feels her heart stumble, as if the words themselves have struck it. Of all the futures she had envisioned children with Jason, afternoons in backyards, Birthdays with frosting on small noses, this is the loss that slices deepest. Tears sting not loud, but steady. Jason leans closer forehead against hers as if to shield her from the sentence, even though it is already lodged in the marrow of her being. His tears gather too, though he does not let them fall in the moment. He whispers that they still have each other, that nothing will strip away the life they can build together. But the ache in Rachel's chest does not loosen. Later alone in the hospital room with machines breathing steady patterns around her, Rachel stares at the ceiling. Jason sits by her bed, his hand never leaving hers. She thinks of her students and how she has always told them not to give up when they meet problems too large to solve in one step. Break it down, she would say. Find the first small move. But tonight, the problem feels too large, the steps invisible. She closes her eyes and wonders how a life so ordinary, so carefully tended, can pivot in a single night into something unrecognizable. She feels like she is standing on a cliff where the air tastes of salt and endings, and the only thing between her and the fall is Jason's hand. Jason stays awake long after her breathing evens into restless sleep. He studies the fragile rise and fall of her chest, memorizing it as though repetition alone could keep it going. He vows silently that he will not let her fight alone. If she must endure, he will endure with her. If she must walk through fire, he will carry water until his hands bleed. In the hall, Dr. Harris writes notes into a chart. The ink measured the words clinical, but even he lingers a moment longer than usual outside her door, as if reluctant to leave a room where 2 lives have just been rewritten. Outside, the night presses against the glass windows of the hospital, indifferent, endless. Somewhere down the block, a streetlight flickers, then steadies. Inside, Rachel dreams uneasily of chalk dust, of children's laughter, of a future that is now slipping into shadow. Jason does not sleep at all. The first climax has been reached, the diagnosis, the brutal clarity, and the stolen dream of motherhood. Their world, once so ordinary, has fractured into a story of survival neither of them imagined. The fight has begun. The hospital becomes a second world. Its walls hum with fluorescent light, its corridors echo with clipped footsteps and the steady machinery of survival. For Rachel Miller, time begins to fracture, measured not in school days and seasons, but in appointments, test results, and the slow rhythm of her body learning to endure. In the days following the diagnosis, the shock lingers like a second skin. Rachel wakes to the smell of antiseptic, not coffee. She folds hospital blankets instead of lesson plans. Her body, once a vessel of steady energy, is now a battlefield of cells misfiring in silence. Yet, in the quiet hours of dawn when the ward is hushed, and only the beep of monitors keeps company, she feels a strange clarity. She is alive, and that for the moment is enough to hold on to. Jason never leaves her side. He sits through consultations, scribbles notes when words feel too heavy for Rachel to process, and offers the steady weight of his hand when hers trembles. He does not disguise his fear, but he does not let it eclipse her. His presence is a constant tether, the reminder that though the horizon has darkened, she is not navigating it alone. Cheng. The surgery comes quickly. Within a week, Rachel is wheeled into an operating room whose air is chilled into sterility. The overhead lamps are blinding, the masks impersonal. Before the anesthesia claims her, she squeezes Jason's hand one last time. He whispers her name as if the sound alone could guide her safely through the hours she will not remember. When she wakes, there is pain. A new scar draws itself across her throat like a punctuation mark declaring that life has changed irrevocably. Her voice is hoarse, the simplest words difficult, but when Jason leans in, she manages a whisper, "I'm still here." The sentence costs her, yet it feels like a triumph. Recovery is slow. Radiation follows its invisible waves, leaving her drained, her body leaden. Chemotherapy brings a harsher toll, nausea that grips without mercy, hair shedding, and fragile strands that gather like fallen leaves on her pillow. Yet, through it all, Rachel refuses to let despair define her. She keeps a notebook by her bedside. In it, she writes not about the illness, but about small beauties, the way morning light fractures across the hospital blinds, the sound of Jason's laugh when he tries to cheer her with awkward jokes, the kindness of a nurse who sneaks her an extra blanket on cold nights. These pages become her anchor, a testament that life, even reduced to its raw edges, still contains moments worth recording. Koi. But the hardest blow remains the knowledge that motherhood has been stolen from her. It is not the kind of loss that painkillers or patience can soften. It is a loss that reverberates in silence when she watches families in the hospital cafeteria, when she recalls the drawings her students gift her crayon families with mothers holding children's hands. One night, Jason finds her sitting by the window, tears sliding soundlessly down her cheeks. He sits beside her without speaking, his arm circling her shoulders. Finally, she whispers, "The future, I imagined, is gone." Jason holds her tighter. He doesn't offer promises he cannot keep. Instead, he says, "We will build another future, one no less real, no less ours." His voice trembles, but his conviction does not. Rachel turns her face into his shoulder and lets herself believe him. For now, that belief is enough. Weeks stretch into months. Spring emerges outside the hospital windows, buds bursting on trees, children chalking sidewalks with pastel dreams. Rachel's strength flickers some days brighter, some days faint. But, slowly, steadily, she begins to think beyond survival. She remembers the flyer pinned to their refrigerator, the charity bike ride for cancer research. What once felt like a small community event now pulses with a new significance. She has sat on the receiving end of the word cancer. She knows its weight. Perhaps she thinks she can transform that weight into motion. When she mentions it to Jason, his first instinct is caution. She is still fragile, her body recovering, but Rachel's eyes, dimmed so often by exhaustion, hold a spark he has not seen in weeks. He cannot extinguish it. "If we do this," he says carefully, "we do it together." She nods, and the decision is made. They begin to train. Slowly at first, short rides through quiet neighborhoods, Rachel's breath uneven, her body protesting. But with each mile she feels herself reclaiming something. The bicycle becomes more than exercise. It becomes defiance, a declaration that she is more than her diagnosis. Jason rides beside her, watchful yet proud, his presence a shield against fear. News spreads. When her students learn of the plan, they craft handmade signs, "Ride for Hope" and "Go Miss Miller." Parents pledge donations. Neighbors drop off energy bars and water bottles. What begins as a private battle transforms into a collective mission. Rachel is no longer just a patient. She is a beacon. One afternoon, while resting after a ride, she receives a letter from a former student now in high school. "You taught me never to give up when math felt impossible. Now I see you living those words. Thank you for being our teacher in and out of the classroom." Rachel presses the letter to her heart, tears blurring the ink. Her notebook fills faster now. Not with pain, but with names of supporters. Notes of gratitude, sketches of bicycles and sunlit roads. She begins to see her fight not only as survival, but as testimony. Jason, too, changes. He had always been the responder, the man trained to stabilize emergencies. But in Rachel's battle, he learns that not all emergencies can be contained. Sometimes the greatest act is not to fix, but to endure. He becomes her caretaker, her teammate, her witness. When she falters, he steadies. When she despairs, he reminds her of the light she has already given others. Their love, tested by illness, grows sharper, more unyielding. At the hospital, staff watch her transformation with awe. Nurses who once tucked blankets around her bed now cheer her as she pedals past the entrance after a training ride. Doctors accustomed to charts and prognoses find themselves moved by the simple audacity of her determination. Dr. Harris, who delivered the shattering diagnosis, visits her during a follow-up. He studies her thinner frame, her tired but luminous eyes, and says quietly, You are rewriting what it means to fight. Rachel smiles, her voice still hoarse but firm. I don't want to just fight for myself. I want to fight for tomorrow, for everyone who needs hope. Décembre. As the date of the ride approaches, Rachel feels her resolve harden. She knows the odds remain steep, the future uncertain. But the road ahead is no longer defined solely by survival. It is defined by choice, the choice to live fully, even in the shadow of illness. On a quiet evening, she and Jason sit at their small kitchen table once more. The scar on her throat is visible in the lamplight, a mark of both loss and resilience. Jason reaches across the table, covers her hand with his, and says, "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Rachel nods. For the first time in months, her heart does not feel entirely burdened. The fight has changed her, but it has not broken her. She is ready to ride toward tomorrow. And to you, dear listener, if you've journeyed with Rachel and Jason this far, let their courage remind you every day is a chance to turn pain into purpose. Their fight is not just theirs, it is an invitation. If this story moves, you don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel for more healing stories. Your support helps us bring voices like Rachel's to light. The morning of the ride arrives like a promise. The Ohio sky is washed clean, pale blue, stretching endlessly, and the crisp air smells of dew and asphalt warmed by the first touch of sun. Rachel Miller adjusts the strap of her helmet with fingers that tremble not from weakness but from anticipation. Her bicycle waits beside her, a modest machine of metal and willpower, but in this moment it feels like a chariot. Jason Carter checks the tires with methodical care, his hand steady, though his heart is anything but calm. He glances at Rachel's scar faintly visible across her throat, eyes luminous with determination, and knows she is carrying more than herself onto this road. She is carrying the weight of every patient, every survivor, every whispered prayer for a cure. The crowd that gathers around them is larger than either of them imagined. Students clutch handmade signs in crayon and marker. Ride, Ms. Miller ride. Neighbors bring folding chairs and thermoses of coffee lining the sidewalks as if for a parade. Fellow cyclists in jerseys of every color offer nods of solidarity, and when the announcer calls her name, the cheer that rises is thunderous, rolling across the town square like a wave. Rachel swallows hard. For months, she has been defined by illness, her days measured in treatments and fatigue. But today, beneath the bright sky, she feels defined by something else, hope. The starting horn blares. Pedals turn. Wheels blur. The ride begins. At first, every push feels heavy. Rachel's legs protest, her lungs burn, but she leans forward into the resistance. Jason rides at her side, close enough to catch her if she falters, yet far enough to honor her independence. The road stretches ahead, dotted with cyclists who blur into color and motion. Mile after mile, the rhythm begins to carry her. The pain remains sharp, insistent, but it is braided now with exhilaration. Children along the roadside ring bells, shouting encouragement. A woman presses a bouquet into her hands during a brief stop, whispering, "For my sister. Thank you." Rachel tucks the flowers into her backpack, her eyes shimmering. The further they go, the more stories they collect. A man in a faded cap rides beside her long enough to say, "Lost my wife last year. She would have cheered for you." A teenager hands her a water bottle scrawled with the word believe. Strangers become companions. Each encounter becomes a thread in the tapestry of her journey. Jason watches her closely. He knows the toll every mile exacts. He sees the sweat on her temples, the fatigue coiling in her muscles. But he also sees something fierce in her, something unbroken. This is not the woman the hospital bed tried to claim. This is Rachel reborn, in motion, her scar glistening in the sunlight like a badge rather than a wound. At rest stops, she signs autographs for children who look at her as though she is already a hero. She laughs with them, though her body trembles with exhaustion. If they see me fighting, she tells Jason maybe they'll know they can fight too. Jason nods, though his throat is tight. He knows she is right. He also knows how fragile the line is between bravery and collapse. Ted. News of the ride spreads beyond Ohio. Local papers print headlines, "Teacher Rides for Hope." A regional news station airs footage of Rachel pedaling past, cheering crowds, her determination written across her face. Donations pour in from strangers hundreds of miles away. What began as a community effort grows into a movement. At night, when the cyclists camp along the route, Rachel lies awake beneath a quilt of stars. Her body aches, her scar throbs, but her spirit feels lifted by the chorus of voices that now carry her. Jason lies beside her, their fingers intertwined, and for a brief moment the future feels wider than the diagnosis that shadows them. She whispers more to herself than to him. "I want to keep living like this, choosing hope, choosing love." Jason presses a kiss to her temple, silent because words would falter. By the second week, the miles accumulate like beads on a string, hundreds, then 1,000. Rachel grows thinner, her endurance tested, yet each morning she rises, pulls on her helmet, and climbs onto her bike. Crowds greet them in small towns, lining sidewalks with banners, "Ride Strong." Rachel. Some offer food. Others donations. Many simply stand with tears in their eyes, watching a woman refuse to yield. In one town, her former students surprise her, a busload of children waving paper hearts. They chant her name until she dismounts, overwhelmed. One child presses a drawing into her hands, a stick figure on a bicycle, a bright sun overhead, the words, "Our Teacher of Hope." Rachel cannot stop the tears. She clutches the drawing to her chest, every mile suddenly heavier and lighter all at once. Jason takes a photograph of her in that moment, knowing it will become a memory they return to again and again. The ride concludes after 2,000 miles with a finish line crowded by thousands. Cameras flash, voices cheer, and Rachel crosses the line with Jason beside her, both lifting their arms in triumph. The scar on her neck gleams under the floodlights, not as a mark of defeat, but as a testament to survival, to persistence, to love. The total raised for cancer research surpasses expectations, hundreds of thousands of dollars that will fund treatments, support families, and fuel the search for cures. But the true victory lies not in numbers, but in the lives touched by her journey. Letters pour in from across the country. Patients, newly diagnosed survivors, grieving families, all finding courage in her ride. Rachel stands on the stage at the closing ceremony, microphone trembling in her hand. Her voice is raspy scar tissue shaping the sound, but the words are clear. Illness may take many things, but it cannot take love. It cannot take purpose, and it cannot take hope unless we let it. Thank you for riding with me, for believing with me. This is only the beginning. The crowd erupts. Jason, standing just behind her, feels his heart swell with both pride and fear, for he knows the fight is not over. Yet in this moment, he allows himself the gift of belief. That night, back in their small apartment, Rachel places the children's drawing on the refrigerator beside the wedding plans, still unfinished. She traces the words, "Teacher of Hope," with her fingertip and smiles. For once, she sleeps without dreams of loss. And to you, dear listener, if Rachel's ride has touched you, if her courage has sparked something inside you, let her journey remind you that hope is contagious and love is stronger than fear. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true healing stories like Rachel's. Share her ride, share her message. Every view, every comment, every click of support is another mile carried forward. The weeks after the ride unfold in a glow Rachel has never known. Newspapers carry her story, photographs of her thin frame on a bicycle printed beneath headlines that call her a fighter, a beacon, a teacher of hope. Letters arrive, daily envelopes stacked high on their small kitchen table, each one carrying words of gratitude and courage from strangers. Children draw pictures of bicycles with wings. Survivors write that her determination has reminded them they are not alone. For a brief, fragile span of time, life feels almost whole again. Rachel carries this light with her into each morning. She cycles through town with Jason beside her neighbors, waving from porches' horns, honking in celebration. At school, though she cannot yet return full-time, she visits her classroom, her students crowding around as if she has returned from an impossible journey. Their joy fuels her, filling the spaces left hollow by illness. She begins to believe that hope itself might be medicine, that perhaps survival can be shaped not only by doctors and treatments, but by the insistence of spirit. She dares to imagine years ahead, autumns filled with chalk dust and falling leaves, winters by the fire with Jason springs, when her students hand her bouquets of dandelions and call them flowers. But life, she learns again, has its own rhythm, indifferent to plans, unmoved by victories. It begins with a routine follow-up. The hospital feels almost familiar now, its corridors less intimidating after months of visits. Rachel sits in the waiting room, flipping absently through a magazine she cannot focus on. Jason holds her hand, his thumb moving slow circles against her skin. Neither speaks of fear. They have become skilled at silence, at pretending calm. Dr. Harris enters with the same measured calm as always. But Jason sees it instantly, the slight tightness around the doctor's eyes, the way he folds his notes too carefully. Rachel senses it too. She straightens in her chair, her heartbeat quickening. The words come slowly, as if even Dr. Harris resists them. Rachel, the scans show that the cancer has spread. It's no longer confined to your thyroid region. We're seeing evidence in your lungs, your liver, your bones, even the spine. The room contracts. The hum of fluorescent lights grows louder, unbearable. Rachel feels as though the floor has tilted her body, weightless and heavy all at once. Jason's hand tightens on hers, grounding her, but his face pales, his lips pressed into a line that cannot hold back grief. For a moment, Rachel cannot breathe. The triumph of the ride, the headlines, the cheering children, it all collapses into silence. She sees herself on the bike again, arms raised, believing in tomorrow, and the memory pierces like glass. She whispers, "But I thought we were winning." Dr. Harris bows his head. "You have been winning, Rachel. You've won hope, you've given strength to so many. But medically this disease is relentless." The words carve deep. Tears rise unstoppable. Rachel turns into Jason's chest, sobbing in a way she has not since the night of her diagnosis. The ride had felt like a rebirth. Now the future feels stolen again, brutally, without mercy. Days blur. At home, the letters of encouragement pile higher, but Rachel can hardly bear to read them. They feel like relics from another life, a life where she still believed in open roads and endless tomorrows. The scar on her neck throbs. Her body aches with new intensity, pain radiating through her spine. Nights are sleepless, haunted by the word spread. Jason does everything he can. He cooks soups she barely tastes, wraps blankets around her trembling shoulders, whispers love in the dark. But he cannot shield her from despair. He feels it himself, a storm he hides behind steady eyes. When she weeps, he holds her until the tears run dry. When she stares at the ceiling in silence, he keeps vigil beside her, afraid to leave even for a moment. One evening, Rachel finds the strength to return to her notebook. She writes only a single sentence. "Hope hurts when it breaks, but I would rather hurt from hope than never feel it at all." The words steady her hand, a fragile lifeline. The community, still inspired, continues to rally. A vigil is held at the town square. Candles flickering against the night, hundreds gathered to honor her fight. From their apartment window, Rachel sees the glow stretching across the streets. She presses her hand to the glass, overwhelmed by the love surrounding her. Jason watches her and realizes, though her body weakens, her story has only grown stronger. She is no longer just his Rachel. She belongs to everyone who has ever faced darkness and needed a light to follow. Ishai. But the weight of reality cannot be ignored. Dr. Harris outlines a new plan: more chemotherapy-targeted treatments, endless monitoring. He does not sugarcoat the prognosis. Time is uncertain. The disease has declared war on her body, and they must brace for every possibility. Rachel listens, her face calm, though her heart quakes. When he finishes, she nods. "Then we keep going," she says softly. Jason hears the words and feels something break and mend at the same time. A week later, Rachel attends a fundraising event organized by her students' parents. Too weak to stand long, she sits on a chair while children perform a song written for her, their voices trembling but determined. The refrain, "Hope rides on," echoes through the gymnasium, and Rachel weeps openly. She realizes that even if her body cannot carry her far, her story already travels further than she ever dreamed. Jason kneels beside her, whispering, "We've come this far, Rachel. We won't stop now." She leans against him, her tears dampening his shirt, and for a moment she believes him again. That night, as they sit together on the couch, Rachel gathers her strength to speak directly to those who have followed her journey. Jason sets up the small camera, recording her message for the channel they've started to share their story. Her voice is frail, but her eyes are steady. "I know many of you believed in me, and I still believe in us. The truth is, the cancer has spread. It's harder than I can say, but please don't lose hope because of me. Let my fight remind you that every day matters, every gesture of love matters. Hold the people you cherish close, and please stay with us. Subscribe to our channel, share this message. Help us keep spreading hope, because hope is bigger than my body. It belongs to all of us." Her words tremble, but when Jason posts the video, responses flood in. Thousands of voices promising love prayers, donations, solidarity. Rachel reads them slowly, tears shining, and for the first time since the diagnosis of spread, she feels less alone. Chapter 2. The second blow has landed with brutal force. The disease has advanced, shattering illusions, demanding courage anew. But even in the aftermath, Rachel's resolve flickers stubbornly like a candle refusing to surrender to the wind. Jason knows the road ahead will be harder than ever. Yet, as he watches her sleep that night, hand curled around her notebook, he vows again. Whatever time remains, they will live it fully. The first climax had been the diagnosis. The second, this devastating spread. And yet, between the fractures, love still holds. Summer settles over Willow Creek in a haze of warm evenings and fireflies. For most, the season arrives with a promise of picnics, lake swims, and fields rippling with tall grass. For Rachel Miller, it arrives as both gift and countdown. Her body weakens daily. Each step requires effort. Each breath feels borrowed. Yet she greets each morning with the quiet resolve of someone who has decided that time, whether long or short, will not dictate her spirit. The cancer has claimed much her energy, her appetite, the easy rhythm of an ordinary life. But it has not claimed her determination. Jason Carter watches her closely. His worry sharpened by love, yet he marvels at the light she continues to give. Even on the days she cannot rise from the couch, she insists on writing letters, recording small video messages, answering the flood of emails from strangers who call her their beacon. She has become more than a patient. She has become a story people tell each other when they need courage. Joy. One evening, Jason wheels her to the community center where a fundraiser has gathered hundreds. Rachel wears a simple scarf, her frail body cloaked in grace. When she enters, the crowd stands as one. Applause rolls across the hall like thunder, sustained and overwhelming. Children hold signs painted in bright colors. "We love you, Ms. Miller." Parents weep openly. Survivors line the aisle, some leaning on canes, others with scarves wrapped around their own healing scars. Rachel speaks slowly, her voice raspy, but every word carries weight. "I used to believe my story would be simple. A classroom, a family, summers by the lake. Life had other plans. But what I've learned is that even in loss there is abundance of love, of kindness, of moments that shimmer. Thank you for reminding me that I am not alone. The hall rises in ovation. Jason, standing nearby, feels his throat tighten with both pride and sorrow. He knows these are among the last speeches she will give. At home, Rachel places the children's drawing teacher of hope on her nightstand. She tells Jason it comforts her to see it first thing in the morning, last thing at night. It reminds me, she whispers, that the best part of me will outlive the rest of me. Jason presses her hand to his lips, unable to speak. He has learned that sometimes silence is the purest form of love. As weeks pass, Rachel grows too weak for public events. Yet her influence expands. Journalists write of her resilience. Donations surge in her name. Teachers in other states use her story to encourage students to face obstacles with courage. Even Dr. Harris, seasoned and cautious, admits that she has changed how the staff think about illness not merely as an enemy, but as a teacher. Rachel records one last message for the world. Sitting by the window, light spilling across her face, she speaks into the camera Jason holds steady. I don't know how much time I have left. None of us ever truly do. What I know is this love is stronger than fear, and hope is stronger than pain. Please don't let my fight end with me. Carry it forward. Hold your loved ones tighter. Be kind when it costs you nothing. And if my story has touched you, let's keep walking together. Subscribe to this channel. Share it. Be part of this journey of healing, because none of us are alone. When the video goes live, messages flood in from around the world. People promise to ride their own miles in her honor, to donate blood, to volunteer to live more fully. Rachel reads as many as she can, her eyes glistening. She smiles and whispers, "It was worth it." The final days arrive quietly. Rachel spends them in the apartment she and Jason filled with dreams, the walls lined with cards, drawings and photographs of the ride. Jason reads to her poems, letters from students, passages from books they once planned to teach their future children. Sometimes she drifts into sleep mid-sentence, and he continues reading anyway, as though the words themselves could guard her. One evening, she opens her notebook for the last time. Her hand trembles, but she writes, "I am not afraid. I am loved. I am hope." Jason finds the entry later, after she has fallen asleep, and presses the page to his chest. When the end comes, it is gentle. Rachel lies in Jason's arms, her breathing shallow but steady, her eyes on the photograph of them crossing the finish line together. With her final strength, she whispers, "Thank you for giving me tomorrow." Jason answers through tears. "Every tomorrow was because of you." And then softly, she is gone. Silence follows, heavy and unbearable. Jason holds her as if love itself might coax her back. Hours pass before he finally lets her rest. Yet even in grief, he feels the truth. She left him. Love does not end. The funeral fills the church to overflowing. Students place paper hearts on her coffin. Teachers speak of her light. Strangers who never met her attend, carrying candles. Jason listens to their voices and realizes Rachel has not left. She has multiplied. She exists now in every person who tells her story, in every act of kindness sparked by her example. Later, Jason returns home to the apartment they once shared. On the refrigerator, the drawing still hangs, Teacher of Hope. He does not take it down. Instead, he adds his own note beside it, "Your hope rides on." Months later, Jason joins another charity ride. This time he pedals alone, yet not alone. On his jersey, he wears Rachel's name. Along the route, people call it out cheering, as though she still rides beside him. In his heart, she does. Every turn of the pedals becomes a prayer, every mile an echo of her courage. At the finish line, he raises his arms to the sky, tears streaming, whispering, "We did it, Rachel. We're still doing it." And to you, dear listener, who has walked through this journey with Rachel and Jason, May her story remind you that life is fragile, but love is fierce. That hope, though it can break, always rebuilds. And that even in loss, we can choose to create light. If Rachel's journey has moved you, please subscribe to our channel. Share her story, leave a comment, and carry her message forward. Every act of remembrance is a seed of hope.